What's up, everyone, and welcome to MMA Fighting's UFC on Fox 22 preview show. I am Danny Segura, and joined to the screen next to me is Jed Meshew of MMAfighting.com as well. And today we're going to be breaking the top storylines and matchups of this card. So obviously we're going to work from top to bottom like we usually do, and that is starting with the main event of the card, which is Paige VanZant versus Waterson. Jed, there was some controversy, and a lot of people were claiming that Urijah Fabers should be main eventing this bout, just out of the lone fact that, this is his retirement bout. He is the face of Sacramento MMA, coach of Team Alpha Male and, captain of Team Alpha Male. So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think Waterson versus Paige VanZant deserve to be the main event, or would you have liked perhaps Urijah Fabers' retirement bout to headline the card?
I get where they're coming from because Uriah Faber has meant so much to the sport. I'm not sure that anybody other than BJ Penn has really meant more to the sport as far as 155 pounds and below. I guess Jose Aldo, but I'm not. I still think there's a tactile difference in what Uriah Faber did as far as the creation of the sub lightweight, sub welterweight weight classes that Aldo's not really a contributor to in that sort of respect. So he is a historically important figure. He is a locally super important figure. Obviously, his entire brand is sort of built around the Sacramento thing. So I understand that concept. I don't agree. I'm very happy with the main event being Waterson VanZant for two reasons. One, I think it's the best fight on the card. I'm one of the people who really wants all fights kind of to be 5-rounders because I think it's better for the sporting aspect of the sport. But particularly this fight should be 5 rounds. And also the second reason being that this fight has the most stakes. Like Faber's retirement matchup, Brad Pickett's a good guy. I don't mean any disrespect to him, but this is kind of a softball for Faber to walk away on, whereas the VanZant-Waterson match has real tangible stakes to it. These are top 10. I think Waterson's actually 11th ranked right now. Top 10-ish straw weights, ostensibly maybe even fighting for a title shot. 115 is still a very thin division, and Joanna Jędrzejczyk has beaten the clear contenders at this point. So the winner of this I could easily see them getting slotted in for a title shot. At the minimum, they're 1 win away. Whoever wins this fight, if they win their next bout, likely fighting for a belt, and very realistically could just fight next.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so give us your official pick. How do you see this fight going, and who are you picking to win this one?
I'm picking Waterson, but it is with a lot of trepidation because there are a lot of X factors going into this, a lot of wild cards. For one, VanZant is super young. She's very young and very athletic, and when you pair those two things, what you get is large, bounding jumps in skill level, and we've seen that to a degree with her. So, it's a 3-month turnaround. She's probably not going to come out and look like an entirely brand new fighter over that period of time, but she still has the ability and the probability of looking much better than she ever has fight in and fight out. So that's a big X factor. The other big X factor, Waterson's been away for 18 months, maybe a little longer. I'm not entirely sure on that. I think her last fight was July of 2015. She had a knee injury, has just been out on the shelf for a really long time, and that type of ring rust always a factor. I know some people don't think it. Dominic Cruz, for one, who thinks ring rust isn't real, but in the aggregate, we've seen that taking time off really does affect people for their return bouts. So, and to play into your previous question, that's actually one of the reasons I am also glad this is a 5-rounder. In a 3-round fight, I would pick Paige VanZant.
Okay.
Because I do think Waterson will probably start a little slower because she's had such time off, and so VanZant wins the first round, then she only has to take one of the last 2, and this is a close fight with a bunch of different avenues of play here. So I would pick VanZant to kind of just build on momentum and carry forward. Over 5 rounds, I think Waterson is a better technical fighter in almost all regards. And so I think over the course of 5 rounds, she can maybe overcome what I am predicting to be a sort of slow start to have her technique win the day against VanZant's sort of rugged physicality. Because VanZant, I think she's a great fighter. She is a genuine top 10 talent. She is only getting better and will likely contend for a title at some point. But her game is a bare bones game built mostly around being really tough and really rugged and just relentless. So like that's not a game against an actual technician, and Waterson is mostly a technician. So I'm picking Waterson. VanZant could absolutely win. She's got some clear avenues. Waterson is has a propensity to get backed up against the cage.
Mm-hmm.
That's where VanZant does her best work. But the one thing that kind of solidified my Waterson pick is VanZant's last fight against Beck Rollins. She was playing at range a lot more. And she was kind of losing the fight until she hit that awesome Yair Rodriguez switch kick KO. Yeah, I mean, that was a great KO. Do props to her. But she was not doing nearly as well playing on the back foot, operating at range, moving around. It's good to see that she is working on these things and that these are part of her game. That's a development that you want. But if she does that against Michelle Waterson, like Michelle Waterson is a storied karateka, she's gonna just snap kick her and low kick her and play at range much better. She's a better fighter in general on the feet, technically, and so she's really going to win there. So if that's the VanZant we see, I feel real good about Waterson winning. If Waterson gets backed up against the cage, becomes much more of a questionable fight, I'm really excited to see it. As I haven't even talked about the ground exchanges. Mm-hmm. They're both good scramblers. That could be a super fun area. I am really pumped about this fight in particular.
Okay, so you're going with official pick is Michelle Waterson for 5
Michelle
rounds.
Waterson, yeah, by decision. I don't think she's going to get VanZant out of there. VanZant is ruggedly tough, and she doesn't get enough credit for it. But the cover girl looks kind of belie that, but she is. I mean, Rose Namajunas just put a beat down on her, and she wasn't hanging in there. She wanted to keep fighting and kept going in it, and that type of insatiability is really impressive.
Okay, now moving on to the co-main event, it is Sage Northcutt versus Mickey Gall, two young guys in a welterweight bout. Sage Northcutt's usually a lightweight, but moving up to this weight class to face Gall. Now, a lot of the questions surrounding this fight were sort of similar to the ones surrounding CM Punk, and I'm talking about Mickey Gall. It's like, what do you do next for him? Because sure, it's to a lesser degree in the sense that Mickey Gall is a way better fighter than CM Punk, and he showed that. But he's still a 3-0 fighter, so we kind of didn't know where he was gonna go next. But obviously now he's fighting Sage Northcutt. Is this the perfect matchup for Mickey Gall?
I think it's a great matchup. I really think the matchmaking was well done here. I do sort of believe they would have naturally gotten to this point anyway, but it certainly didn't hurt that Mickey Gall kind of foresaw this as a good avenue for him to go down and called out Sage immediately after beating CM Punk. So yeah, I think it's a great matchup. I think promotionally it makes sense. The one thing about it that doesn't really have anything to do with their matchup, actually, it speaks to our first question is, why is this the co-main event of the evening instead of Urijah Faber? I am totally for Urijah Faber not being the main event of this card. His fight with Brad Pickett doesn't mean much, but seems like he deserves to be the co-main event over this fight. And while I think this fight should be opening the card, or not opening the card, should be opening the main event, the Fox, portion of the card. Because I get it, you're trying to push these two bright kind of young spots, people that you foresee as having promotional value, and Sage Northcutt absolutely is a promotional boon. You're really happy to have him. Mickey Gall looks like he could be. Like he's growing into that role, and he seems to really be attracted to the role. I mean, The Rock retweeted him like 3 days ago or whatever. So he has the potential to get there, and so you definitely want these people featured in big bright lights on the Fox card. 100% agree with that. I do think Urijah Faber deserves the co-main event role, and I don't think putting them in the co-main really elevates them to anything super impressive.
I mean, I would agree with you because the sort of Waterson-VanZant fight, we might be staring at a possible title eliminator, so it is a very important fight for the division. But Northcutt versus Gall doesn't really do much at 170 pounds, although they're both young and they're prospects. So I would agree with you. At least I would have liked to see a Faber Pickett fight being the co-main event. But then now let's move on to your official pick. Gall versus Northcutt. We really don't know much about Mickey Gall. I mean, we do have those two fights in the UFC, but they were both against non UFC caliber opponents, and they ended fairly quick. So again, it doesn't really tell you much. He still remains a mystery in my book. But how do you see this fight going, and what's your official pick? I'm
picking up what you're putting down there, man. Because we know nothing about Mickey Gall. The extent of what we know about Mickey Gall is he is big for the division. He appears to be a pretty good athlete. He is a very good grappler by all accounts. He's a well-regarded brown belt. The things we know about him all come mainly from his grappling credentials because there's video of him in competition rolling with well-regarded black belts and holding his own. And the Miller brothers speak incredibly highly of him. And you can see why. There are the bones of what look to be something good there, but we know nothing about him actually. I'm still going to pick him based pretty much on the fact that I know he's a very good grappler. He seems to have good timing on his wrestling takedowns, and kind of just a pick against Sage Northcutt. Sage Northcutt's going to be smaller in this fight in general. Sage Northcutt is a limited fighter. He's limited because he's also 20 years old. Like, this isn't a knock on Sage Northcutt. Yeah. He's an infinitely better fighter than almost anybody else ever was at 20. He doesn't have a tremendous defensive wrestling game in general. His striking is great. He's a longtime karate practitioner or taekwondo, one of the two. Sport karate. He's got a lot of accolades there, but we haven't seen that play out as much in the octagon as you kind of would think he would do. He really he's this hyper athletic, and he sort of figured that out and understands, like, hey, I can just blast double these people and sit on them and punch them in the head, and that's like a really easy way to win. And it is, and it works well for him. He is a good offensive wrestler. I'm not taking that away from him, but I do think he over relies on that a bit. And if he's going to start getting into grappling exchanges with Mickey Gall, granted, this isn't based off real fighting knowledge of Gall, but based on his grappling credentials and watching him roll, like, that's not a good look for Sage Northcutt. Sage Northcutt lost the grappling exchanges to Brian Barberina. Mickey Gall's going to eat him up if they're in those type of deals. So pretty much it's just a pick based on the fact that I do think there will be grappling involved, and I would be very surprised if Sage Northcutt wasn't wildly outclassed in those exchanges, because Gall seems to be a very good grappler, and Sage Northcutt still seems to need a lot of work there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now let's move on to the next fight, which, in your opinion, should have been the co-main event, but it's not. So it's Urijah Fabers versus Brad Pickett. First of all, this is obviously Faber's retirement bout. Is this the right time for Faber to retire? I mean, he's still a big name in the bantamweight division. He wasn't getting smoked in his fights. He's still a competitive guy. He wasn't like one of these guys like perhaps Vitor Belfort or Dan Henderson, where people were already like claiming for him to retire. And he's also ranked number 7 in the division. So what are your thoughts? Is this the perfect timing for Faber to walk away from MMA?
There's an old adage in combat sports that goes, if people think it's too early for you to retire, you're retiring right on time. Mm-hmm. And I sort of feel that way with Urijah Faber. I think people hang around in this sport far too long for a myriad of reasons, and it's kind of forced us all to question things. Like, I don't think anybody really wants to see Vitor Belfort continue fighting. That's just the name you threw out, but it is a good example of it. Chuck Liddell basically had to be forced into retirement by Dana White. I don't think I'm with you. Urijah Faber's still a top 10 fighter in the division. He was not super competitive. He didn't have his doors blown off by Jimmy Rivera though, and Jimmy Rivera is going to fight for a title within the next year and a half. He is still a competitive guy. He can still pick up good quality wins. He can still probably get wins over top 10 people in the bantamweight division, though he is 37 years old, and that's he's going to start trending towards the back end of the division more rapidly. I think it's a fine time to retire. If he didn't say, I'm going to retire, I wouldn't have any problem with that either. And so that probably means it's a great time to retire. Like, when you think of who left this sport at a good time frame, very few people have retired on good terms. George St. Pierre is like the one guy who was a huge star. Example, that's the point I'm going to get to, though, is he is your prime example, and he's about to come back. My next best choice for this is Chris Lytle. Like, the next person I think of, a guy who retired in a good fashion at an opportune time, is Chris Lytle. And 9 out of 10, way way higher number. I was going to say 9 out of 10 people on the street don't know who Chris Lytle is,
Yeah.
but it's actually like 10 out of 10 people on the street don't know who Chris Lytle is. So like when that's kind of your number two best benchmark for how to do it, like that's not a good sign. And so I'm happy that Faber is not going to be doing that. I think Faber retiring in Sacramento, he's gonna get a win here. It's a pretty good time. The only one small caveat I have is I get it. Brad Pickett's a named guy, a tough guy. He's been around for a long time, was a good fighter. I mean, still is a good fighter, but was an elite fighter at points. They never faced off, but there was a potential for them to have fought for years. I would have much preferred him fight BJ Penn as his kind of go away bout because for a lot of reasons, right. BJ Penn being one of those guys who is probably just going to die in the octagon, and it's going to be awful. Like, it's just so. Yeah, for real. Like, he is, and that's the thing. Like, Faber's not going to be BJ, and that's awesome. So I'm glad he's, retiring when he sees fit, and that's good. If he wanted to stick around, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I think he's probably picked a good time.
And, what's your official pick? I mean, it kind of seems like you already gave us your official pick, but again, how do you see this fight going, and who are you going with?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to pick Faber here. Like I said, Faber's still a top 10 talent. Brad Pickett's a good fighter, but he is older than Faber even, and on a pretty noticeable decline. Plus, just stylistically, it doesn't really match up that well for him. He has the one-punch moniker. That's not really his game. He is a combination striker and mostly a grappler. I brought up Chris Lytle, and shockingly enough, I actually think Brad Pickett is a pretty good approximation of Chris Lytle in that people think of both of them as strikers, but what they really are talented grapplers. And Pickett has more subs than he has TKOs in his record. Pickett is a good grappler, but he's not. However this plays out, it's probably not going to work well for him. Faber is a limited striker technically, but he still packs bigger power. He's still explosive. And Pickett's chin seems to be kind of dropping a little bit. So on the feet, he can probably just overwhelm him with the bringing a shotgun to a knife fight. And on the floor, Faber is still Faber. He's an excellent transitional fighter. He is quicker than Brad Pickett. It just all adds up to a very poor night for Brad Pickett, who's another guy who should probably be retiring, and I think will probably retire. And I think there's a London card next year, like Fight Night 10 something. I wouldn't be surprised if Pickett got on that and walked off on that one.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you mentioned Chris Lytle, and I believe he fought Dan Hardy in his retirement bout, and they were main event of the card. So, it's not like the UFC. If I'm not mistaken, they were main event of the card. So it's not like the UFC has done a retirement bout for a fighter, placing them in the main event. But yes or no question: will Urijah Faber make the UFC Hall of Fame? Although he's never won a title. I mean, he's done a lot for the lightweight divisions, both 100%. In and outside of the UFC.
100% he makes the Hall of Fame. 100%. Stephan Bonnar made the Hall of Fame literally because he fought Forrest Griffin once, and it was really important. Yeah. And we're talking about a Hall of Fame that has a fights wing that they could have just inaugurated that fight into the wing, but they just gave Bonnar a Hall of Fame. Urijah Faber absolutely is, and he might end up being kind of like the benchmark for that sort of guy who is a clear, great but not world elite level of fighter. Guy who fought for Kenny Floyd. He fought for a bunch of titles, never could win one. He may end up being kind of the future benchmark for that type of fighter and how they get into the Hall of Fame. Their contributions beyond just fighting for many titles matter, and so I think will absolutely make it to the Hall of Fame.
Okay, last but not least, opening the main card, it is Alan Jouban versus Mike Perry. I think Luke Thomas would describe this fight as bonkers. Let us, give us your prediction on this fight. Quick breakdown as well, and who are you picking in this one?
It's a good old-fashioned slobber knocker. I'm super torn on this fight. Mike Perry might end up being real good. I know people have a lot of problems with him, his sort of outside the cage, his background, a lot of things like that. To not comment on those, just to comment on who he is as a fighter, he's a good fighter. He is very athletic. He's young. He packs a lot of power. Is very durable. He's got good fight IQ for being so young in his career. He sort of has a good natural understanding of how to fight and where like the ebbs and flows of a fight, where he fits in. And what kind of most impresses me about his game is he knows what he doesn't know. Like he has a pretty stripped down game in a lot of ways, but it works for him because he focuses on the things he's good at and he doesn't kind of get outside of that zone. So he has a lot of holes. Those will get filled in time. He's not great defensively, but he's tough, so it kind of makes up for that. It's tough for me to pick him here. I mean, it's not. Honestly, I kind of want to pick him because Jouban is not going to improve as much as Perry is. But these are pretty similar fighters in the fact that they're both kind of hard-nosed strikers. They both throw heat on the feet, and they're durable guys. The reason I'm going to pick Jouban very slightly is he has a good secondary avenue in the clinch. Mike Perry is a kind of range or pocket boxer, and that's really what he's got going. He's not going to do too much else, as far as I've seen on all his regional stuff. Even like he's kind of in that zone. Alan Jouban can work at range. He's a southpaw, so that's always a nice little addition to have to your game. Super helpful if you're a fighter to be a lefty. He's got big power. He has good chin, same as Mike Perry. Maybe just a little bit more craft or variety. It's tough to say that in general, but he also just is a good clinch fighter. And so if he kind of is losing these exchanges, Mike Perry has power, but it's not real one hitter quitter power. He's going to hit you and put you on skates. And then, he dropped Kung Yu Lim like 40 times before he finished him. He's a tritive with it. He wears you down by hitting your head really hard. So he's not going to really just cold Alan Jouban. So if Alan Jouban's kind of losing on the feet, I think he's going to be able to recognize that, get into a clinch, and sort of work him over with knees, elbows on the inside. He's not much of a wrestler. He doesn't really choose to go to the ground a lot, so probably would just stay in that clinch. But he could maybe work a trip takedown and just grind on top to sort of slow the pace down. But whoever's going to win this fight is whoever dictates their pace. If it's going quicker, Mike Perry's probably winning. If there's a lot of strikes, a lot of action, he's probably going to end up winning. I do think Alan Jouban's going to be able to slow it down, get it to a more comfortable wheelhouse for himself, and grind out a decision, maybe get a late stoppage, because Mike Perry's very tough, but you eat enough of those heaters, you're going to fall.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and also Jouban probably has the experience side on has the experience on his side, obviously fighting for the UFC for quite a while now. Well, Jed, thank you so much for your. Before we go, is there anything that stands out in the undercard that you would like to point out before we go? Any matchup or any interesting storyline leading up?
I think. I mean, so the undercard's it's very low on name value. Let's just throw that out there immediately. I do think that there's some fun matches that might be interesting action fights. The best fight would be the Eddie Wineland-Takeya Mizugaki fight, but that fight's probably not going to be that exciting because I think Eddie Wineland's going to win that handily. I'm excited to see Irene Aldana in the UFC. She is a prospect at women's 135 pounds. That is a rarity, so that's good, and it's going to be even more needed than ever as the implementation of women's featherweight came about. And that's going to probably poach several of the 135ers you're going to move up. So the division that's already thin needs all the help it can get. So happy to see her here. I think she's going to beat Leslie Smith, but that's the exact type of fight she should be debuting on. Other than that, just kind of am a little interested to see how Cole Miller looks. Because he's been story, Yeah, exactly. He's been so vocal about kind of his disagreements with the UFC, the Manila fallout, everything going on. Kind of his head doesn't seem to be in the space at all, so I'm interested to see that. Not much else. The only fun fact for you, though, that I realized when I was doing my research for this card, that's probably not that enjoyable to anybody but me, this is actually UFC Fight Night dudes who have beaten Cody Pfister. Of Cody Pfister's three UFC losses, all of them are on this card. So it's that kind of stuck out to me when I was doing my research, and I was like, oh, this is funny and weird. But yeah, that's that's all we've got, or that's all I've got as
Mhm.
far as that. I also kind of think all three guys that Fister beat are probably going to win. So, or lost to are
Mhm.
probably going to win. So that's fun. But yeah, nothing great on the storylines other than Aldana and Miller. But it should be a fun fight card, and I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, interesting debut for Aldana. Aldana trains with Alexa Grasso, and that team has been on fire. And then interesting on Miller, it's his last fight on his contract. That's noteworthy. So who knows where he'll go next, if he'll stick around with the UFC, or perhaps a Bellator will pick him up, or maybe I wouldn't even be surprised if he goes overseas, say to like a ONE FC or something like that. Um,
Ryzen Openweight Grand Prix still got
Rising
a
as
slot
well,
in
yeah.
it.
So, Jed, again, thank you so much for your great insight. They can find you on Twitter at Jed K. Meshew, right?
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken, yes, you can find me on Twitter as well at Danny Segura TV. Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up, enjoy the fights, and we'll catch you guys next time.